So it's Saturday morning, day before my 46th birthday, and I'm heading up to a place that for me holds a lot of importance in my life, I suppose, and some of my best memories, in fact. And that's up the AFR in Antrim to grapple with my true instructor and one of my closest friends, Davy Patterson. Now, if you're involved in Irish MMA currently, maybe you're in your 20s or early 30s, there's a good chance you've never heard of this guy. But that doesn't mean he isn't one of the most influential guys in Irish MMA's history. Davy Patterson helped Irish MMA become what it is today. He was a pioneer, but he's one of those true martial artists in that he never did it for the glory. He never did it for Facebook fame. He did it for passion. He did it because he just literally loves the sport. He lives and breathes it. He's in his 50s now. I think he's 10 years older than me, actually, Davy. So that means he's 56. I think he's 57 in September, the old boy. But he still regularly grapples on a daily basis with men half his age and still shows them that old dogs can learn new tricks. The man is a phenomenal grappler. He's also one of the quietest and humblest guys I've ever met. And when it comes to actually trying to get him to answer a phone, I think you're going to be waiting for Jesus to be resurrected before you'll get to him do that. But honestly, his influence on Irish MMA cannot be overemphasized. His influence on my life, like I've said this many times, and I say it with pride because I believe giving respect and honour where it's due. Without Davy Patterson's influence in my life, I would not be making this video. I would not have Primal, Fight Academy Ireland, and all the fighters that are fighting out of there wouldn't exist. Just simply wouldn't exist. And it's the hidden history of Irish MMA that I think a lot of these new generation fighters don't actually understand or respect or appreciate, because the influence and the sacrifice and the experiences that we had to go through in the early 2000s to get fighters where they are today, it's been forgotten because we're now so interested in ticket deals and social media presence, because MMA's become a business, an opportunity for so many men, both coaches and fighters, to actually make something of themselves. But it wasn't always that way. Back in the day, back before all this popularity and the McGregor time happened, it literally was just a group of guys who had no clue what they were doing, trying to just become better. We had to literally teach ourselves martial arts, the MMA that you know today. The MMA that you can go onto YouTube or Instagram or any social media site and get endless techniques from. If only it was easy back in them days. I've told this story many times and I'll tell it again. Greg Locker and Thomas Duffin, myself, Davey, Leo, Jared, there was a core group of us back in 2000, 2001, and we had no clue what we were doing. None. And Davey would order VHS tapes from America, from Brazil, and we would have to just learn the techniques that were on that tape, and with no one to show us how to do it. We just had to press play, watch the video, rewind it. Rewind, do you remember even rewinding things? And then you have to watch it again, all these grainy images coming on the TV, and you'd be rewinded constantly to see where the hand placement went or where his foot went. And sometimes, quite a lot of times, the guy speaking didn't mean shit because they were speaking in Portuguese and we had no clue what was fucking going on. But we just persevered, had a laugh, and taught ourselves. And we had Grapple Magazine once a month, and Grapple Magazine allowed us to learn maybe 3 different type of techniques every month. One of them would have definitely been in the gi. I remember when we started out, we would wear wrestling boots because wrestling boots was cool then for some reason. We didn't have a clue what we were doing. We were just guys in their 20s and 30s meeting up and just beating the shit out of each other, punishing ourselves, and it was just a different ball game. Do you know, today you look at the fighters and you've got amateur fighters training like pros. They've got their nutrition nailed down, their training nailed down, their sleep nailed down. Everything is down to a fine art. Back in my day, Jesus, there'd be days you'd be up in Davy's gym, same place it is today that it was then, and you'd have the likes of Rodney Moore and Emmett McNally in the gym sparring each other, and everyone knew 3 weeks time they were going to be fighting in the Elk in one of Davy's epic shows, because they didn't have any sparring partners. You know, I look at fighters today and they're all picking their opponents and they're trying to keep that zero, and I get it, it's professional, or even amateur, you know, it's important to get this, and that's the culture anyway today. But back then it was a different kettle of fish. Back then you didn't have that luxury of sparring partners. You just had who you had, and you could be sparring someone 10 kilos lighter than you, 20 kilos heavier than you, 10 years more experience than you. It didn't matter. And you know what? No one cared either, because there was something magical about back in them days when you were doing it for the love of the sport, doing it because it was new, it was fun, it was exciting. We were doing it because we were martial artists who just wanted to learn, and we've seen this new thing appearing that seemed to genuinely work. And you were watching the UFC and the Gracies, and they were fucking beating the shit out of guys 20 times their size, and they were just choking them out. And it was an era that, unless you've experienced it, you've no comprehension of what it was like, because all you've got is the idea of what it is like today, and you think it's always been like that. But in order for you to get where you are today, there had to be a group of first generation, second generation fighters, the pioneers, who went through the madness of the experience back then, so you can all have the experience of what it's like today. There was no gloves. There was very little rules. I remember Thomas Duffin over in England fighting and headbutting, because headbutts were allowed back then. I remember the first day Davy came in with a pair of gloves that today's standards you wouldn't buy on eBay for £1, but we were spending 25 quid on them because that's all you had. And not only is that all you had, but we thought they were fucking amazing. We couldn't get over it that we actually had these gloves now, and we were looking in awe at these blue plastic pieces of shit with foam on them and a wee crappy bit of elastic and Velcro. But to us they were a sign that we were MMA fighters. In fact, we were cage fighters, because MMA, the term, didn't even exist back this stage. And we used to beat the shit clean out of each other in sparring sessions. And you'd walk into fights and you would know who was going to win what fight, because you'd been spent the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks sparring them. And you knew how they were going to finish the fights, because we only knew a handful of techniques and we knew who was the better one, and we always knew who was going to finish what in the spars anyway. And that's what made it magical and different, I suppose, when you look back in hindsight from rose-tinted glasses. Do you know, there was this just core group of guys all training for different gyms and different teams, but still training with each other and learning off each other. And it's only when you look back now do you realise just how magical that moment was. You had the Burrow brothers and Tom Lamont from Chum Sut. You had Rodney Moore starting his own gym, even though he came down to us. Hugh Fullerton trained with Gracie Baja. You had Greg Loughlin and Thomas Duffin, myself and Davey for AFR. And you had a handful of other guys from down south, John Kavanagh's, Andy Ryan's, Dave Roach, I think it was, Muay Thai fighter. And you just had cage wars, no weigh-ins. Or if you did have weigh-ins, didn't mean shit because you were fighting a guy 10 kg heavier than you, 10 years more experience than you, getting your balls kicked in. And not only that, ticket deals. I look at young boys, these amateur fighters, complaining they're not taking a fight because they're not getting enough money for a ticket deal. Fuck me, we had to pay for our fights. We had to pay for the privilege of driving down to Galway. So we had to chip in together. I remember driving Davy's blue Peugeot 306 down to Galway to Cage Warriors 2 in the black box in Galway. And we had to pay for our own room. It was just madness. It was insane. And when we got there, Greg and I got our balls kicked in. Davey won. But there were setups and it was just insane. But it was beautiful. And it had to happen in order for the fighters today to get the experience what Irish MMA has become. Because Irish MMA is starting to set itself on the map. And it's really starting to get its name known as producing some really high caliber fighters. And it's great to know that, fighters like myself, and I was never really a fighter, I was a coach. I just fought because I knew I wanted to coach, and I had to learn how to fight. I had to learn what it was like to fight. I had to know what it was like to experience those nerves of being in the fight. But we laid the foundations for what Irish MMA has become today. Like I keep saying this, I would not be talking to you now. I would not own Primal Strength and Movement. Fight Academy Ireland just wouldn't exist without the influence of this man's gym. This guy, just through a sheer love of a sport and a desire to learn, has enabled hundreds, if not thousands, of young men in Ireland to experience the sport of martial arts and mixed martial arts. Irish MMA did not exist without Davy Patterson. The fight teams of today did not happen without Davy's influence. 10, 15 years ago, Davy had the most prolific fight team in the country. Anyone who was anyone in this country was fighting under the AFR banner. And they were literally unstoppable. They've had guys fight some of the world's greatest fighters. Mickey Young fought Jose Aldo. Greg Loughlin is one of Irish MMA's biggest stars that new fighters today probably have never heard of. Greg Loughlin nearly beat Eddie Alvarez. Nearly got him in a choke, I think it was. Nearly knocked him out, actually. Nearly knocked him out. I suppose I'm being nostalgic, but the time that we had when MMA was just in its infancy, there was a magical moment to that. 2007, when we got to go to the UFC with Stevie Lynch, we were like kids in a candy store. There was just something very validating about walking into the Odyssey and seeing these, then the elite of the elite, Forrest Griffins, etc. That it was like almost, I don't know, it was an amazing experience because there was no one doing it back at that time. A year before Stevie Lynch got to UFC, no one in Ireland would have had the belief that anyone in Ireland, any fighter in Ireland, could ever share the cage with these elite fighters. And yet here we are in 2023, and let's be honest, for quite a number of years Irish MMA dominated because of the McGregor influence and John Kavanagh's ability to get so many fighters through to that level. But before that there was Davy Patterson, there was Rodney Moore. You know, Davy Patterson brought Stevie Lynch, the very first Irish fighter to walk into the UFC octagon. And then Rodney Moore followed that with Colin Robinson in 2007. And yet here I am, 46 years old tomorrow, and I'm going back up to the place where it all started to grapple with guys half my age and hopefully teach them an old dog can learn new tricks again. But it's the exact same. Fight Academy Ireland, it's evolved. EFR Martial Arts, it's the exact same room, the exact same energy, the exact same layout. The only difference between my day and now is that the mats have got a covering. But apart from that, there's nothing changed. And this is what I love about EFR. EFR is something special. It's completely different to the rest of the MMA world because it is there for fighters. It isn't about the gram. It isn't about social media influence. It's literally about the sport, the art, the dedication and discipline, and the honouring of the ethos of what MMA should be. What's beautiful about EFR is it's still got its foundational beliefs that are steeped in the tradition of martial arts, and it's something that's been forgotten, I think, in this world where you have to keep your zero, and picking fights and picking your opponents is more important than the actual art itself. With Davy, it's about the underlying belief of just still being a martial artist and what a martial artist entails. It's about respecting your opponent, respecting yourself. What works has always worked and always will work. I can guarantee I'll go up here and there'll be Hindu push-ups, Hindu squats happening. There'll be a neck bridge, there'll be mountain climbers and grasshoppers. There'll be sprawl sets, partner drills where you're jumping over the partner and spinning around their head, staying low, knee on belly. Because back when we started out, this was what gave fighters the edge. Drilling the techniques and movements that you use in a fight in a conditioning setting. And it worked then and it works now. And I know science has moved on. And I know that there's all this scientific evidence and data to prove that this works, and deadlifts and all these explosive Olympic lifts and every other type of fitness influence you can have. And listen, that's my game, that's my bag. I'm not knocking it. But what I am knocking is, because of this influence of the strength and conditioning aspect and the need for strength and conditioning coaches to prove how good they are, we've lost touch with the ethos of what it is to be a fighter. That pit bull doggedness has been lost. Do you know the fighters of today? I just don't think they would have the mental fortitude to be able to bang out 500 unbroken Hindu squats, 50 Hindu push-ups, and a 3-minute neck bridge to warm yourself up for the warm-up. The attitude of fighters today, it's more important for them to be seen to be a fighter than to actually be a fighter. It's more important for them to keep their O than it is for them to test themselves and discover the true depths of who they actually are. Let's be honest, if you're an MMA fighter, you've got trauma. You're fucked up in the head. You've got issues. And if you deny that, you're only in denial to yourself. Because the average man or woman does not voluntarily step into an arena where they know the only outcome of this is to inflict pain upon someone, and have knowing that other person is going to want to inflict pain upon you, and to willingly accept and take that in the hope that the pain you can inflict can outdo your opponent's pain, and that you can be better than that person. But we were lucky because we didn't have the influence social media that is today. We didn't need to live up that hype. There wasn't that pressure upon us. We didn't do it for validation of the masses. Of course we did it because we liked being fighters, and there was that persona. For me there was anyway, and I'd say if anyone was honest, there was that sort of underlying young man belief that you were tougher than everyone else, but you didn't have the ability to have your efforts recorded and put on social media and impressing people. There was a very small number of men and women who knew what you did. So for the vast majority part, you did it for yourself, and you did it for your teammates, and you did it for fun. And there's something that, it's romantic, I suppose, nostalgic, but there's something that I miss about that, because there was a love for the sport and not a love for the fame that drove so many men to do what they did today. And within that shared experience, there's something that resonates with all the first gen, second gen fighters that can never be replicated, never be experienced by anyone else. And we're probably forgotten the history of Irish MMA now for the vast majority, as MMA's become a business. But I suppose just like a coach doesn't need the validation and fame of the fighter, there's something within the Irish MMA community of the first generation fighters that we know, and we can sort of sit back and smile watching the growth of the sport, knowing that our influence has allowed it to happen. Like, I'm still a coach. I'm just passionate about learning the art. I get excited today. I still get excited when I'm showing some cool fucking snazzy 10 combination leg lock, choke out, arm breaking, neck snapping move that's just like, what the fuck just happened? I'm still a kid when I see that, and I want to learn it just so I can show it to others and teach the others. I was never a fighter. I knew that from day one. I never enjoyed fighting. Fuck, I hated fighting. Fighting was too hard for me. I was too vulnerable. I was too insecure. I did it because I was bullied and I needed validation from others. I needed to be accepted in my own self. I needed to believe that I could handle myself, because the young boy inside of me, that traumatized child who had been bullied from day one of his life, he needed someone to protect him. And I had to become that protector. I had to become that guy. So I did martial arts as a way of helping me become the man I needed to in my life that I felt I didn't have, but that was toxic. And I'm grateful for Davy Patterson, because Davy allowed me the ability to do that, and he controlled me in a way that I needed. He influenced my decisions. He stood up for me, and he spoke up for me, and he believed in me, and he allowed me the space I needed to start that journey, to start believing in myself. I look back now in hindsight and I realise just how influential that man is, and he knows it. I think he's a very quiet man. He would never admit it, and he'd be embarrassed probably by it, but the man is one man on this planet has had probably the biggest influence in my life when it comes to the outcome of it. I speak about this regularly, this incident, because it's ingrained in my mind. It's a moment in my history that was a pinnacle moment for change. Without this moment, Paul Murray, probably the guy I am today, doesn't happen. And I was in the front door of Shine, and my best mates Ricky and the guys had done the door with the Shine, Robbie and all, they were slagging me because I'd got beaten my first fight in overtime. Keith Bradley choked me out, fucking wrecked my shoulder. I wouldn't tap from a Kimura, and fuck did I stupidly, the ego But it was that I do know that that moment, even though I got defeated, I now know that I realised that I could do it. I remember I just wouldn't quit. That arm bar, that Kimura was on so tight, I felt my shoulder popping and I just wouldn't. I made a decision that moment that I was going to let it happen or fight out of it, but I wasn't going to tap, because I had tapped out all my life. I had tapped as a child from every experience I ever had. I had lived in fear my entire existence. And this was my moment. This was the place that I discovered who I truly was. So it didn't tap, and I seen out that round, and then I was told I wasn't allowed to kick anymore because Keith had bad legs, and that fucked me off. I remember being fucked off with that, but it didn't adapt. I was too insecure of myself. I almost let that moment defeat me. And I remember getting the choke on Keith, and I was knackered. I was blurry. My eyes, I couldn't see anything. I was so fucked. It was only 5 minutes in a 2-minute overtime, but we'd never trained for this. And the adrenaline dump that I'd experienced was just like nothing I'd ever seen. But this was something that no one could save me from but myself, and I recognise that now. I recognise that I was looking someone to save me and there was no one coming to help me, and that was the pinnacle moment of my life, to realise that I had to do this myself. But anyway, I didn't get the hooks in. Keith flicked me over his back and sunk the choke in myself, and I had to tap. And I remember feeling dejected and broken like a failure, not realising just what I'd achieved, ignorant to the experience and the lessons to be learnt. But I remember I was broken and I was putting on that mask and I did the cope with a joker and didn't give a fuck type of face. And the men, all the boys that were slagging me, that kick guys do, not nasty, just slagging. And I remember Davey standing up for me, and it was something that it made me emotional. And I can remember I had to fight back tears because it never had happened to me before. I remember Davey stood up in front of all these guys and went, "Paul, never let anyone put you down for your efforts. You had the balls to step into that cage and leave it all there and put yourself on the line. That's more than they ever did. It's more than they'll ever do. So you're more than they ever will be." It's a powerful moment. It was a moment that changed my life, and I know it doesn't sound like much, but for me at that time it was everything. Because I was living as a scared little boy in a young adult's body. I was having to present to the world a version of myself that wasn't a true representation of who I wanted to be. And I just remember having a moment of pride for what I had done. And I'd never thought of it like that, but Davey had allowed me to do that. So he is the reason I am the way I am today. And because of that moment, I've been able to help influence hundreds, if not thousands, of other men's lives. So yeah, if I've ever had an influence on you through my coaching or training methods, understand that you've got this man, Davey Patterson, to thank.